First story. My family friend's daughter falsely accused me of assault, and my entitled family disowned and kicked me out. Now, 22 years later, after I rebuilt my life with my new family, they want to reconcile and said we are family. I lost it. Throw away, as I just want some quick advice, and don't think I'll be using this again. A super long story short of a story that happened 22 years ago. I'm now a 41. I'm one of 4 kids growing up in Adelaide, Australia. I have an older brother and 2 younger sisters. A couple of days after my 19th birthday, the daughter who we considered family of a close family friend of ours accused me of assault during my birthday party. My family took her side of the story, and I was disowned and kicked out of the family house. I then had to move in with my aunt and her family, who live in another city, Melbourne, 8 hours away, and rebuild my life from the ground up again. Fast forward, 22 years later, I went and finished university, met my now wife, and now I have a family of my own with 2 young kids, 10 and 7 years old. My aunt and her husband have been my rock throughout this whole time. They believed in me and even helped me in those early years to get back on my feet. Even today, my family would be going over to their house on a weekly basis for family meals with her family. Fast forward to about 3 weeks ago, in late March. My aunt called to tell me to come over as my father and siblings were at their house, and they wanted to speak to me. I was reluctant, but my aunt strongly advised me to come, as I wanted to hear what they had to say. When I arrived at Auntie's place, sure enough, there were my old family, siblings, and all. They were just so much older now, but it was definitely them. Cut the long story short and give you the gist about it. I asked them what they wanted. My father and siblings spent the next few minutes apologizing and explaining to me that they had just recently found out from the horse's mouth that the accusation was all false. They started crying, begging me for my forgiveness and hoping we could reconnect. When they had their turn to speak, I just calmly told them no and got up to leave. My older brother begged me to stay and try to work this out. He said we were family. When I heard him say this, I just bluntly told them all, no, you're not. They're just strangers to me now. My real family was my aunt and her family. Her sons were my siblings. They were my best man and groomsmen at my wedding. I'd even changed my surname to my aunt's surname. When my father heard this, he completely broke down. I didn't care. I thought I would be angry or something along those lines, but I wasn't. I felt nothing for these people. They are just strangers to me now. I didn't even ask about how the truth came out. I didn't want people to know I didn't care. I told them never to contact me again. They're dead to me, as I was to them all those years ago. At this point, everyone from my old family just broke down and cried. I know their tears were genuine, but again, I felt nothing for them. After this, I just left. My aunt has been checking in on me over the next few days to encourage me to forgive and forget. But I said I had nothing to forgive, as these people were strangers to me. She respected my decision. I know I left out a bunch of things in this story, but I've tried to write it up a couple of times already, and it always turns out to be too many pages long. So Ada for not wanting to reconnect with my family. Edit update. Hi all, and thanks for all your replies. I read as many as I could. I want to take this opportunity to address some of the things I've noticed in the comments. 1. Some people think this is a fake account since it's new, and the username is generic. As I'd mentioned in my post, this is a throwaway. I don't have an account, and I don't see myself using this after this post. When I signed up, this was the auto-generated username, so I just went with it. 2. Some people are throwing shade at my aunt about her desire for me to forgive and reconcile, and the relationship she has with her older brother, my father, and I should set boundaries. I want to say that my aunt is an absolute gem and the most kind-hearted person I know. Hence, I know she's coming from a good place, but I had to reinforce my view on my decision, and she respects my decision. I also want to say that, over the years, she and my father have always had a relationship. However, I made it clear to her very early on that I didn't want to reconnect, or for her to give updates about how I was doing or how my life was going, and she has always honored this request. 3. Some of you questioned their motives for reconnecting. They needed an organ. I don't believe this is the case. My aunt assured me no one was dying, sick, or along those lines, and I took her word for it. 4. Some of you wanted revenge by legal means on my accuser. I had thought about this for so long in the initial years after it happened. But as time passes and the years roll by, I'll be honest, I don't even think about it anymore. Hence, I didn't confront my family about it. I also have no idea why she's confessed now. I didn't ask, as I didn't care. 5. Some of you suggested I block them all. Well, the good thing is that I don't need to. I don't really have social media apart from Facebook. But even then, I'm not very active on there at all. I checked my timeline, and the last time I'd posted anything on there was back in 2018. They don't have my phone number, so I haven't received any calls or messages. Mind you, when I was 19 years old, it was 2001, and I didn't have a mobile phone. Hardly anyone I knew had a mobile phone. On the day that I was kicked out, I had to walk to the nearest phone booth, put in some coins, and call my aunt to see if I could come and stay with her. I remembered I had to take a taxi to the bus depot and take a long, distant shuttle bus to Melbourne on the same day. Second story. Delusional OP married his daughter's friend, resented his daughter, and told her he wished she was never born. Now, he's having a meltdown because she didn't invite him to her wedding. Then, nuked his only chance of reconciliation that his daughter gave him after her grandparents' harassment by showing up and being busy banging his wife, her friend. This is my first time posting on Reddit. I know I will be met with harsh judgment, but I need advice on how to rebuild a relationship with my only daughter. I 43 want to start off by saying that I know I was the one who ruined our relationship, but it's been 3 years already. I just don't see why she can't come around. I miss her terribly, and she's my one and only girl and my only child. I should explain that when I married my current wife 3 years ago, it caused quite some backlash from my friends, my community, some of my family members, my ex, and, of course, my daughter. But I had to marry my wife. She's the only one for me. She's beautiful, she's intelligent, and she's a kind and caring woman. I knew my daughter would have some problems with my marriage, but I never expected how harsh she could have been. She begged me to end this marriage. She pleaded with my wife to leave me. I had to admit that I'm not proud of myself. But I told her that I wished she was never born, that I resented her, and that she meant nothing to me. I already had a rocky relationship with my daughter. She never approved of my relationship with my wife, but we would at least have a talking relationship. Since that day, she hasn't spoken to me. If I am being honest, I miss her, and I decided to see on social media how she was doing. She's engaged. I am her father, and I found out about my own daughter's engagement through social media. That was when I knew I had made a serious mistake. I don't want to miss out on any more of her milestones in life. I contacted her through social media, but she blocked me. I want to reach out to her again. I want her back in my life, but I need advice. Edit. I will be editing this post to answer some questions and paint a clearer picture. For one, I did not meet my wife when she was a minor. That would have been extremely disgusting, and I would have seen her differently if I had. Everything about our relationship had been legal, and there was clear consent. I met her when she was 18. We dated for a total of 8 months before we got married. She had always been more reserved and shy, so we agreed on an elopement. I am not planning to have any more children in the near future. As for the relationship between my wife and my daughter, they weren't enemies. They were simply friends. She started coming over, and a relationship between us naturally developed. She was skeptical at the very beginning, but I truly love her, and I know she feels the same. I must also say that my wife is an adult woman. She is not a baby. The way that a lot of you consider her to be a child is frankly disturbing and hurtful towards her. She can make her own decisions, and she chose to be with me. Why else has she stayed by my side for 3 years? Relevant comments. The best advice for you is to accept the consequences of your actions. You reap what you sow. If I were your daughter, I would also cut you off, especially now during the engagement. Leave her alone. I'm sure there is someone decent enough to walk her down the aisle. You don't realize how disgusting and awful you are. I pity the young woman you groomed, and hopefully she wakes up soon. Another user adds, "Ugh, can you imagine how embarrassing it would be for her perverted dad to show up with his child bride? Talk about drawing focus from the wedding couple. Do you have the vaguest idea of how viscerally disgusting it is to have your parents effing a teenager the same age as you? How did you even meet the barely legal love of your life? And why do I suspect it was through your daughter? And you married 3 years ago. Exactly how old was she when you started the relationship? Add to that the horrendous things you said, making it clear that your wife was 100% your priority, and your daughter was relegated to an inconvenience and a hindrance. I don't know if there's anything you could do to rebuild that relationship. You met your wife because she was your daughter's friend and was coming over to visit her. And you married her at 18. You can say she was an adult all you want, but it's clear you were creeping on your daughter's friend and married her as soon as she was legal. Yuck. And you can't ever come back from wishing someone had never been born. That's some burning of the bridge and scorching of the earth. And you think time will heal wounds, that she will just get over it. without you apologizing or putting in any effort. Nah, not how that works. It's very telling that you were completely okay with not being in her life for 3 years. And only now that you realize you're missing out do you want her back. Where was that when she had to go through her 21 years without a father? Update. 21 days after the original post. I expected a lot of backlash when I posted my first post regarding my issues with my daughter, but I hadn't expected the death threats and the accusations that I am a pedophile. I met my wife when she was 18 and an adult, and I just know I am unbothered by the death threats. It just shows how immature some people can be. Now, I did end up meeting with my daughter, and I suppose I'm just posting this to get this all off my chest. I received a message from my daughter. She had unblocked me and sent me a brief message. She wanted to meet up, and I was feeling hopeful. I thought maybe she realized that she needed her father in her life. Though she followed it up by saying that my parents had pressured her into at least trying to speak with me, that hurt a bit. I thought she wanted to meet up and reconcile out of her own volition. But even if it was just pressure from my parents, I was still happy. This was my chance to make things right. On the day when we were supposed to meet up, I made a huge mistake. I lost track of time. I was busy with my wife. She was too cute to ignore, and well, one thing led to another. And by the time I remembered, it was already 30 minutes after we were due to meet at the local park. I can't forget the look my daughter gave me. She almost seemed as though she didn't care and even expected this. I tried to explain myself the best way I could. I kept it vague and said I lost track of time, but she wasn't having any of it. I tried so hard to get through to her and explain that I was sorry, but she just coldly told me to make my parents leave her alone. She told me that I wasn't her father anymore and that she'd never forgive me for everything I did. She told me that if I or my parents ever bothered her again, she would stop talking to my side of the family completely. I had to admit, I was getting a little angry as my parents had done nothing wrong, but I held my tongue. To add salt to the wound, she told me I wasn't invited to her wedding, and her maternal uncle would be walking her down the aisle instead. I felt broken. I wanted to make things work. I had to make things right. I kept trying to get through to her, but her fiancé showed up, and they left, just like that. I couldn't even get another word in. She didn't even introduce me to the boy. I just feel like it's all over. My parents have been blowing up my phone, blaming me for screwing up and embarrassing them. But at least I still have my wife by my side. I feel so effing alone, but with her, my life doesn't seem like a complete hole. She's all I need. Relevant comments. You said it. Your wife is all you need. And by losing track of time, on the one day your daughter decided to give you a chance, you proved to her that you don't, won't, and haven't ever put her first. You brought this on yourself. It's tough to believe this is real. Reading your other post, it appears that you left your wife and family to spend your late middle years banging on your daughter's high school friend. You then married an 18-year-old after an 8-month relationship. You were 40. You then told your daughter you wished she'd never been born, and she cut you off. Is that about right? You find out via social media that your daughter is marrying, and you're reminded that you have children other than your wife, and that you're a truly terrible father. You get your parents to pressure your daughter to meet with you, and you're an hour late because you were banging on your wife. Now you're whining that you're alone. That's what happens to people who are wholly selfish, as you are. Moving forward, leave your daughter alone. You've done enough, and she clearly doesn't matter to you anyway. I truly hope that life brings you every little thing that you deserve. Not this loser again. I can't wait for his crying post about his young wife, leaving him for a guy her own age. Another user adds, I literally cannot wait until he begins to smell like an old man and she leaves him. I hope she takes him for all he's worth. You've got to be a troll. Effing up your chance of maybe starting to reconnect with your daughter because you just couldn't resist bumping uglies with your so cute wife, who just happens to be your daughter's age. Yeah, right. Did you ever answer the question of whether your wife was an associate of your daughter? Oh, maybe for the drama. Did your daughter's ex-friend, who is now your wife, get all SXY with you to derail the meeting with your daughter? Will there end up being identical twins after a faked death? Tune in for next week. A user replies. He met his current wife when she came around his house with his daughter, when both girls were both in high school. Third story. I joined my wife in counseling because she was neglecting our son while favoring our daughter as punishment, all because I complimented his cooking. She took it as a hall pass to cheat and do drugs, and was caught after an overdose, so I divorced her. Now she's begging to reconcile and accusing me of stealing her kids. My wife has always been the one to cook around the house, and as an Italian, it's one of the reasons I fell so hard for her. I've offered to help out in the kitchen or even cook for her sometimes, but she's always firmly, yet politely, told me no, and I can't really blame her because I did not get either of my parents' good cooking genes. Because of this, I've always been sure to thank her for every meal, and I've taught my children to do the same. For the past year or so, my son has been watching a ton of cooking videos on YouTube and TikTok, and he's really been wanting to try his hand at cooking. My wife was happy to teach him, and at least twice a week, the two of them will go out to the store, buy ingredients for a meal he found on TikTok, and come home and make it. It's been awesome seeing them bond more, since they haven't really had much overlap in interests before this. About a month ago, after dinner, my son asked his mom if he could try making us all a meal on his own. I said it sounded like a great idea, and she hemmed and hawed for a little while before agreeing. So that Saturday, she took him to the store to get his ingredients, and then he got to work. She supervised here and there, but he insisted that she didn't need to. So eventually she came to the living room and sat with my daughter and me, looking a little bit dejected. So I reassured her that I was sure he'd still want to cook with her. He just wanted to try it out on his own. That seemed to help out a little, but she still seemed a little off. When he finished, and we all sat down to eat, I was honestly surprised at just how well he managed to do on his own. I feel bad saying it, but even after a year or so of cooking with his mother, I expected him to mess up more than he did. I wanted to encourage this interest of his, so I was sure to let him know while I was eating how good he did and gently bring up the few mistakes he had made. I did it a lot more than I usually would with my wife's cooking, and in hindsight, I can see that that's what started all of this. His sister, being his little sister, was not as supportive as I was and quite rudely insulted his cooking. I was going to tell her to mind her manners and be thankful that he cooked for us when my wife made a sound and pushed her plate away, before agreeing and saying that it was too salty and overcooked. This took me aback, and I could tell my son took it hard too, as his mood visibly dropped. I didn't say anything at the time, since my wife and I never argue in front of the kids, and I just kept up the praise of my son's cooking as his mother picked at the plate for a little while longer before she took her and our daughter's plates to the kitchen. A little while later, I had gone to check on my son, and I could tell that he had been crying, so I comforted him and told him I was sure his mother loved the food and that she was probably just having a bad day, not to take it personally. Then later, once the kids were asleep, I confronted her about it, and she tried to just brush it off, but I pushed, and she got mad and said that I complimented his cooking far more than I ever complimented hers. This caught me off guard, since I didn't expect my wife to be jealous of our son, and I unfortunately let out an involuntary scoff at this. She blew up at me for laughing, and we ended up arguing for a while before eventually I managed to explain that I was complimenting him so much because I wanted to encourage him to keep cooking, and she even admitted that she shouldn't have been so harsh about it. She said she would apologize to him, and I figured that everything was settled. That Monday, when I was driving my son to school, I noticed he wasn't acting normal and was looking out the window, trying to hide his face from me. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me he was fine, but I could tell he was fighting back tears, so I asked him again, and he broke and told me that after I had left to get the car started, she told him that she was going to be cooking alone again from now on. I was furious about this, but kept my cool and told him I would talk to her about it. I bought him a snack from the store before dropping him off at school. I left work early so I could get home before the kids and talk to my wife. I'll admit I didn't handle it as well as I could have, and we ended up in a shouting match where I was calling her childish for being so vindictive towards our son because she was upset with me, and she called him a baby and said he shouldn't be so sad about not being allowed to cook since it wasn't a man's job to do so anyway. We ended up leaving each other alone to cool down, and when our kids got home, my wife took our daughter out and came back later with a load of toys and clothes for her. I knew immediately what she was trying to do, and that night I told her that I would not let her use the money I make for our family to punish my son. She didn't take this well, and we ended up arguing again. I slept in the guest room and have been up to this point. For the past month, my wife has kept up this vindictive showering of our daughter with attention and gifts, while almost entirely ignoring my son. I've been talking to my parents and brother about this, and while they agree that she's wrong, they also don't see it as that big of a problem and think it'll sort itself out. At this point, with how she's been treating our son, I'm starting to fall out of love with her, but I also don't want to just jump to divorce if there's something that I can do to fix this whole situation. I can honestly say that we've never had a fight this big. Sure, we bicker every now and then, but she's never taken that out on my son in the past. I feel responsible and guilty about what happened, and I've been trying to do nice things for my son when I can. But I also don't want to mirror my wife's behavior. So I've also been taking my daughter with us about half the time we go places. But whenever we do, she's been very rude and always talks about all the stuff her mother does for her lately because she knows it bothers her brother. Seeing the way my wife has been treating our son has made me second guess our marriage. But I don't want to just jump straight to divorce either. Any advice on what I should do or how to best bring up the topic of therapy would be appreciated. Relevant comments. Ancient bicycles. Get into counseling immediately. Your wife is abusing your child. This is a very severe issue. I would consider taking your son and removing him from your marital home to protect him while you seek the assistance of mental health professionals. OP. If I had any inkling that she was actively harming him in any way, I wouldn't hesitate to remove him from the house and find him somewhere to stay. I considered asking a family friend if he could stay there, but with school going on, I'd rather keep him at home. My biggest worry is that if I get him to stay somewhere else, he may take that as me siding with his mom and removing him for her sake. I've asked him about it, and he's pretty upfront that she just generally ignores him. She still calls him for dinner and does his laundry. I've even asked our daughter if she's noticed anything, and I get the same story from her, and I neglected to mention it in the post. But she's also started to catch on in the past couple days that what her mother's doing is wrong. I was hanging out with my son in his room, playing games with him, when she came in all teary-eyed and apologized to him. I've been doing my best at ensuring him that I am fully on his side, and if anything new happens for him, please tell me so that I can help him out. I appreciate the advice, though. Update. Obligatory, but genuine, thank you for all of the support, even the comments that got a bit nasty. That kind of pushback helped me see that things were a lot worse than I realized. Some of you could do with being a bit nicer, but the advice is appreciated all the same. Short recap. My wife and son cooked dinner together most nights for about a year. My son wanted to try cooking dinner on his own, which my wife accepted, but he started acting funny. She ended up rudely criticizing his meal. Then the next day she told him that she would do the cooking on her own from then on. And after I confronted her about this, she started neglecting or emotionally abusing him while shoveling positivity onto our daughter. The first thing I did after making my previous post was take my son to my parents' house to tell them what was happening from his mouth. I figured they may be more receptive to seeing the pain their grandson was going through and not just writing it off like they had with me. They ended up understanding and supportive of my next move, which was kicking my wife out until she worked through whatever problem she was going through. Next, I went to a lawyer and consulted with him. He told me it would be best to have the papers ready to go, even if I wasn't sure I wanted the divorce yet, because it's better to get it done as quickly as possible if I decide to go through with it, because in Canada, you have to separate for a year or prove abuse or adultery. I took the kids to my folks' house the next Saturday and came back with my mother. I let her talk with my wife first, and when they were done, I told her that I needed her to leave the house until she sorted out whatever was causing her to act this way toward our son. She, surprisingly, agreed to this. I'm guessing hearing things from my mother knocked some sense into her, as they were always quite close. I told her that my parents were willing to let her stay there during the time because her parents lived too far away, or I could put her up in a nearby motel. I would also pay for her to see a therapist every week, which I told her was mandatory for fixing things. Our kids spent the night with my parents, and we moved her out the next day. We both sat with the kids and told them what was happening. Our son understood, but our daughter didn't and was quite upset. But eventually we calmed her down. Things went well for the first month or so. She went to all of the weekly appointments, and I met her for dinner a few nights a week with the kids, and she seemed to be treating our son properly again. I was really hopeful that she had been making progress. Then, on Friday, after her 5th therapy appointment, she sent me a wall of text messages about how I was an arsehole, how I was trying to steal her children from her, and how I was probably effing someone on the side. I tried calling her to see what she was talking about, but I think she shut her phone off. I called my mother, and she told me that my wife had left the house earlier that day with all of her stuff without saying anything to my mom. I'm not 100% sure what happened next, since my wife has refused to tell me most details, and I can't get in contact with the friends she was with. The best I can piece together is that she had told her best friend about what was happening, and that friend started telling her all about how I was just trying to kick her out and steal her kids. She then moved in with her friend and went on a week-long bender of clubbing, drinking, and drugs. When we were younger, we did our fair share of stupid SHT together. So while this was surprising, It was most likely her Dunbar's friends convincing her to relive the good old days. I hadn't heard anything for about a week. Then I got a text from her friend, telling me I was a loser, that my wife was too good for me, and that she was effing a younger guy. I tried to demand she give my wife the phone so I could talk with her, but I never got a reply. I screenshotted the text for evidence if I needed it. I ended up getting a call from the hospital at like 3 in the morning that Sunday. My wife had overdosed on something and was dropped off at the ER by someone who didn't stick around. Since I was her emergency contact, they reached out to me. I called my mom to come watch the kids and headed over there. They managed to get her stabilized and were treating her. I stuck around for a few hours, and she was in and out of consciousness, and when she wasn't very talkative. When she properly woke up, she started apologizing for everything, and that's when I found out the few details I knew about her friend and the bender. I asked her if she had been effing someone else like her friend said, and she didn't reply, which was as much of an answer as I needed. She kept trying to apologize, and I just kept my cool and told her this wasn't the time or place for this. We ended up leaving at about 8 a.m. the next day. I got her back to my parents' place, got her into bed, and just before I left, I put the papers on the table beside the bed and told her that I expected her to sign them within a week, and that I had proof she cheated on me during her bender. I had told my parents I was planning on doing this on the phone, so I wasn't just dumping this drama on them without warning. The kids are both doing fine. They don't know anything about what happened with their mother or the divorce. All they know is that my wife is still moving out, and that she's busy getting better, so we're not going to be seeing her as much. I'll probably tell them in a couple weeks whenever school lets out for the summer, so it doesn't affect their learning. Over the next couple weeks, I've gotten countless calls from her, ranging from begging for a second chance to screaming at me that she hated me and was going to make my life hell, going back and forth every other day. I've also been getting vitriolic texts from her family and friends calling all sorts of names and threatening me that if I don't drop the divorce, I'll regret it, all of which have been screenshotted. My parents agree that divorce is for the best, but they're questioning my timing and wondering if I shouldn't have picked a better time to do this than when she was fresh out of the hospital. I'm 100% sure I want her out of my life, and I plan on going for full custody of my children, as I don't want them around my wife, if this behavior is what she's willing to stoop to. And while I do want it done as soon as possible, I'm wondering if I should take back the papers and tell her I've changed my mind, at least until she's a bit more stable. Ida. I saw comments suggesting I take my kids to therapy to explain the situation to them. I have a session set up with a therapist in a week, and I just wanted to wait a tiny bit longer for their school to be as finished as possible. I forgot to include it when I first typed everything out. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.